Hey everyone, there's always some people that predict a housing crash is coming, something like a 20% drop in Australian median average house prices. So what I thought I would do is I posted on my Facebook group with almost 50,000 investors. I said, guys, what would actually cause house prices to crash, like truly crash in Australia, not just like in one location, because there's always corrections, there's always markets like suburbs going down 10, 15, 20% then up. So, it happens. But on a national level, because a lot of people on YouTube, other places, they always kind of comment that, oh, great information, but house price crash is coming. So I thought, let's dig into that. So in this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to go through 8 reasons why house prices could crash. And these are legit reasons. I'm going to share the reasons, and then I'm going to give just a quick sort of overview of my response or thoughts on it. Eight reasons house prices could fall 20% or more nationally.
Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you.
Number 1, war. So, there's a lot of, and by the way, I'm just in a terrific, I think terrific anyway. This is kind of like my man cave right now. It's really hot upstairs. It's so hot and humid on the Gold Coast. So this is where I come down below my house next to the water, and I've got all these like beautiful plants, a whole like rainforest vibe, and this is where I chill out. It's much more cooler down there, and down here and next to the water it makes me really peaceful. Anyway, I digress. Number 1, let's go. War. There's always reasons why war could go on, but it's more of a, I think, likelihood perhaps than before. What do you think? But, Taiwan, China, the Middle East thing going on, Russia, Ukraine, Pacific Islands, all nations are investing in their military and their defense forces. So if Taiwan, China friction happens, could that lead to something? There's even people online saying, hey, there's so many alliances being formed globally, there's so many conflicts, it could lead to a World War 2.5, like a World War 3 light kind of thing. So I thought, okay, well, that seems like a reason why house prices could crash, right? But then when I went back and looked at the data, I found that both in the First World War and in the Second World War, 39 to 1945, what we found is between 1940 and 50, house prices in Australia doubled, and a lot of reason for that is when the war finished, a lot of refugee soldiers came back, they expanded the population, the birth rate went higher, and then in the 50s, we had like the biggest boom ever Australia's ever seen. House prices like doubled or tripled in just a number of like less than 5 years or something. So when I think about house prices, I think definitely in the time where there's a war going on, there's kind of a freeze on real estate, not much will be happening, just like between 1939 and 45, all building supplies, all materials were used for the defense force. So that would create like a shortage locally. And if the Australian government did have a policy where they embrace, refugees and things like that, and of course Australia's always a political haven because it's so stable. I know we think it's not stable with so many governments coming and going, but when you look, abroad, we're actually pretty good politically, like comparatively speaking. So a lot of people want to come here from China, India, Southeast Asia, Europe, America, South America, etc. So I think war, you can't really say it would just cause a 20% crash. The second thing that people on my Facebook group said could cause a 20% crash is this 18.6 year cycle. I won't go into that in too much detail, but there's this concept of 18.6 year cycle where every 18.6 years house prices go down, land values go down, etc., etc. Now, the last time, this happened was the GFC, and according to that, a lot of people say, well, in 2025, that's when house prices should go down. But in the GFC, and that was the biggest recession we've had since the Great Depression, house prices only went down nationally. I'm talking national, okay? It only went down 8%, okay, according to ABS. So, are we going to see something even bigger than the GFC in the next couple of years? Can never rule it out, but I don't see it happening. And if you look at the 18.6-year cycle, even before the GFC, there's no clear trend that there is a cycle, at least not in the Australian real estate context. So I'm not convinced on that one, but if you guys know more than me, feel free to let me know. The third reason is a net negative death rate, okay? So no natural population increases. What China's going to be experiencing, already experiencing, I think Japan experienced it for a long time in their real estate prices. Even though Tokyo is super expensive, their real estate prices kind of stagnated for many years. So that's also a reason why people think house prices could crash. But if you look at the data, when I looked at it, it said that actually over the last 15 to 20 years, the natural birth rate, we're not talking about immigration here, like assume no immigration, the natural positive net birth rate, births minus deaths in local Australia, is about 100,000 a year, 100,000 people a year. So what could cause that to go down? Like, things happen, economic woes, cost of living, etc., etc. But even if that goes down to just normal, not normal, because normal is 100,000, but down to zero, why would that cause a crash? I mean, you still have all these people, the existing population, demanding the houses. And, it's not like another 100,000 people every year is what's causing house prices to go up, right? So I think once again, feel free to let me know what you guys think. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, join the Facebook group so you can be part of this discussion. But I'm not convinced, right? I'm not convinced. And even in places like Japan, now they're finally turning things around. I don't think a stagnation in population growth will cause crashes. I think that would also just simply cause a stagnation in property prices, not a downward trajectory. The fifth reason that people in my Facebook group said that could cause a 20% crash in national house prices is a global recession. Okay, global recession. I kind of went through this before. We had a global recession. Last time we had it, I think people don't realize this, it was actually in 2020, right? We went into a recession, unemployment rate went it spiked up to almost 9%. The US went into we all went into technical recessions. I know that's not technically a deep recession, but there was a recession, and we all know what house prices did during COVID. But that was different. Let's go back to previous recessions, like the 1990s recession, which is a proper recession that we had previous to the COVID one. Yes, house prices did dip, but once again, they didn't dip by more than 5 or 6%. And if you go back to the Depression, yes, in the 20s, that did cause a huge fall in house prices. But every recession we've had since then, okay, whether it was led by global events or local events, the maximum house prices have fallen is about 8 to 10%. So what does that tell me? Yes, recessions are not a great thing for house prices. They're not a great thing for anyone, I don't think. But they come in different varieties. And some recessions you can get ahead of by quantitative easing, which they didn't used to do pre-70s, right, with the fiat currency. So, since the 70s, they've really started to print money, whether it's good or bad, mostly bad, unless you're on the right side of the equation and already own assets, because they just go to the moon because of debasement and everything like that. So I think recessions, global recessions, it's a scary topic, but if you look at history, house prices do fall. Yeah, 100% they fall, but not by 20% or more. And these days we're starting to get ahead of these things anyway with fiscal and most importantly, monetary policy. I don't think we're going into a global recession. Talks are that almost all analysts are predicting that we'll be hitting a soft landing, as unimaginable as that sounds. They've never really hit a soft landing happening, but this may be the first one, or all these analysts may be completely wrong, but unemployment rate is 2% less than long-term averages for almost every nation around the world. So even if unemployment goes up, which it normally does around 2 to 3% in a recession, then we're just going back to long-term averages. And I think we're sort of insulated from a hard landing because of how much money was put into the system, and a lot of that is still not soaked up. All right, and obviously most businesses are doing well. There's always stories of otherwise, but I've done other videos sharing my screen with charts and things like that, but I don't think a global recession will cause a 20% fall in house prices. A fall, yes, but not a 20% fall. And in fact, I don't think, at least not this year or next year, we're going into a global recession. Who knows what happens in the midterm? No one can really predict that anyway. You see economic forecasts as the weather. You try your best, you take an umbrella, but you go to work anyway. It's not like you stay home and cower under your duvet. All right, so that was number 5. Number 6, this is a really, I'm not so educated on this one, so I want to be upfront and admit that. Climate change. Number 6, people said climate change. If climate change does in fact occur in perhaps the trajectory it's going, then maybe, I don't know, maybe places in Queensland, places in New South Wales that have been flooded again and again, maybe insurance premiums go up so high that people don't want to live there anymore, or water takes over a lot of coastlines. Maybe that happens in 10, 20, 30 years. I don't know, but I don't think that will cause a national 20% reduction. I think the areas impacted could be those that are traditionally flooded, maybe, could be those that are more hotter and humider, is that a word? Humider than other places around Australia, maybe. But yeah, I don't see, most of Australia, yes, it's getting hotter and hotter, but does that mean that people don't want to live in Australia anymore? Does that mean people will migrate away from Australia to places like New Zealand? No, I can't predict the future, but I think it's unlikely in our lifetime. But who knows what happens? Climate change is a controversial topic. Is it truly changing because of us? Can we reverse it? Maybe the human society finally gets its act together and reverses it, or is it not because of us anyway? And this is a natural cycle in which the Earth evolves. Yeah, I'm not educated enough in the subject, but something to be wary of for sure. Number 7, an asteroid. Okay, so all bets are off. This YouTube channel won't exist if there's an asteroid. Number 8, affordability cap. This is a very interesting one. I just want to spend a couple of minutes on it. So the theory goes that, how with wages not keeping up with house prices, and they've never kept up. Okay, for the last 50 years, wages have, house prices have gone up like that, wages have gone up like that. So wages have never kept up with house prices. At some point, there's a tipping point. At some point, there's a breaking point, right? That's the theory, okay? But then you look at that and say, okay, as quote-unquote unsustainable as it has been, it's been fueled by fiat currency. It's been fueled by debt. It's been fueled by the fact that one gold bar still buys the same house 50 years ago that the same gold bar buys today. So is it really the problem of housing being not affordable, or is the problem currency debasement because of too much money printing that is in turn causing inflation, and therefore people with assets are becoming richer and richer and richer and benefiting from money printing, from currency debasement, from inflation of their assets, because hard assets like real estate go up the most when inflation exists. That's a 40-year phenomenon if you look into the data. If affordability continues to get worse and worse, my question to you is, what is the definition of affordability? Of course, we don't like it when the average person can't afford houses in Australia. But let's be honest, the average wage in Sydney is not $200,000. It's less than $100,000. Yet the average house is almost 1.5 million. The average person can't afford it in Sydney. The average person can't, average wage can't afford a property in Brisbane, can't afford a property, maybe even in Adelaide these days. Perth is a little bit different, it's more affordable. My thesis is that affordability, the definition, unfortunately is wrong that we're using. If enough people can afford property, then property goes up. And with the normal distribution curve of wealth distribution being tipped on its head, where most people aren't in the middle anymore. Most people are on the left, on the poorer side, or on the right, because of inequality increasing, which is what capitalism does over time. And so the middle class is getting squeezed. And so the average, or the median, is, it's drifting left towards the poorer side, but more and more people are getting richer. Okay, I mean, there are statistics around that. I can't remember off the top of my head. More and more people are getting richer, and more. And Australia is one of the biggest migration points for millionaires. If this is true, then what that tells me is that if enough people can afford these properties, then they don't go down. So that argument is somewhat, I mean, tell me what you think, because it's a big thing to say, oh, look, if the average person can't afford it, then that has no bearing on house prices. Like, that's a pretty big thing to say, and I think I need to think about that more myself. But I want you also to consider, all right, if there's a room full of 10 people, and, like, there's a peanut butter jar on the table in that room for some reason, and 8 people can't afford it, but 2 people can, does that peanut butter jar still get sold? Okay, and the answer is yes, because there are still 2 people that can buy it. And then if the room increases, right, and there's 20 people there, and now, like, 19 people can't afford it, but 1 person still can, then it still gets sold. All right? This is like a pretty crappy analogy. I just thought of it on the fly. But do you understand the concept? So I think that's what's happening in Australia. I think that's what's happening in many Western democracies around the world, fueled by the meritocracy that capitalism allows. And it's all based on government and corporate debt. Is that going to be a house of cards? I can't predict the future. I'm not like a Reserve Bank governor or anything, but I don't think it is a house of cards. I think I'll get many comments by people saying it is a house of cards, but I don't think it is, because once the house of cards starts shaking, they just print more money to stop it shaking. And then so maybe our kids' generation, sees the fallout of it. But anyway, this is all postulation. But coming back to the original point, right? If enough people can afford very expensive properties in our cities, both regional and capital cities, even though the average person can't, I don't think that causes a house price crash of 20% or more. So those are the 8 reasons why people in my Facebook group said, very intelligent people as well, many of them, well, most of them probably much more intelligent than me, they said that property prices could crash by 20% or more nationally. Of course, there's corrections after every boom. There's a correction. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like a genuine crash that would prevent you from buying or investing in real estate, beyond just, surfing the corrections and the booms. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. And I don't think any of them, my responses, I think none of them, save and except the Asteroid one. I think this Asteroid one is the one that, maybe the climate change one, but mostly the Asteroid one. I think none of the others are going to cause a 20% crash in Australian real estate, because it's never happened beyond the Depression. Yes, if there's another Depression, it probably will fall 20% or more. Let me know. I mean, when you share your thoughts and comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, or the Facebook group, please use some like deductive logic or reasoning to share your thoughts. If you disagree with me, or if you agree with me, same. Use deductive logic. If this, then this, that leads to that, then that leads to another thing. This is how, PK, you've missed things, and actually there could be a 20% crash coming. That would require, that thought process would require a combination of economics and social insights, and I think that would be good to keep the discussion going. Let me know your thoughts, guys, and if you're listening to this on the podcast, thank you, by the way. We have almost 30,000 people listening every single month, and join the Facebook group, and so we can engage you as well in the back and forth community. My name's PK, guys. Thank you for being part of this community. I want to bring you more of this sort of left field content. I think it's really beautiful to discuss. I'll see you next time. See ya.